Hello, and welcome to the Living Well show, the program that strives to empower older adults to live life on their own terms. I am your host, Nicolette Hume, the Community Engagement Coordinator for the City of Lake Oswego Adult Community Center. Today, we will be talking about relationships and creating a relationship that you love. I think we can all agree that now more than ever, our intimate relationships are certainly vulnerable during this time. With the pandemic keeping us all together at home and in close quarters, we have seen our fair share of relationships either fall apart in the media or maybe even firsthand. I think many of us have realized that prior to the pandemic, many of us were kind of living on autopilot or maybe even distracted by our screens. So we've seen some of those relationships really put to the test. But I can say there is a silver lining with this pandemic. It's really given us the opportunity to go deeper and really see what our relationships are made of. I would like to introduce today two guests who I have worked with before on the Living Well talk series in person. And I will say that they had very rave reviews from our participants. I would say that we had a varying array of participants in age who just really appreciated the information that they gave because they're just very direct to the point and really share a lot of knowledge that all of us can take home with us. These two women are located locally here in Portland and have quite a following as they've been helping many individuals as well as couples change their intimate lives for the better. So please welcome to the show licensed marriage and family therapist and certified sex therapist and owner of the Center for Couples and Sex Therapy, Maegan Megginson, and her colleague, clinical sexologist and certified sex and intimacy coach, and owner of Do Your Sex Life a Favor, Kristine D'Angelo. Welcome.
Hi. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us. We're really excited to be here.
Well, I can tell you that, again, as our participants have had rave reviews of you, we had a number of men come out, which is very unheard of in a public setting. But I will say one male and participant said the information you gave was liberating. So I'd really like you guys to share some information about what started you on this journey and what made you decide to go into this field. So let's start with you, Maegan.
Yeah, thanks again for having us. So I'm Maegan Megginson. I am a couples therapist and I'm an ASECT certified sex therapist. I started my career working with couples about 10 years ago and discovered in my first couple of years as a couples therapist, I should say, that I really didn't have any tools or skills that I needed to help couples with their sexual problems. And this is really a problem in the field. You know, just because you're working with a couples therapist doesn't mean that that person is equipped to help you through your sexual problems. So I really committed in my own career to being a provider who can do both. I went to University of Michigan, a postgraduate program to really study sex therapy, became a certified sex therapist, and now own a counseling center here in Oregon where we really aim to train couples therapists to do great relationship work and great sex therapy all in one place. So that's who I am. That's what my career is all about. And I'm super excited to be here today to talk about some of the foundational pieces that I have found in my therapy office really lead to happy, long-lasting relationships.
So my name is Kristine D'Angelo, and I'm a clinical sexologist and certified sex coach. My journey began in the late 90s when I realized that I personally needed more information about my own sexuality and my own journey to empowering myself to step into my sexuality. And I just didn't have the tools. I didn't have the education. So I decided to just start educating myself. I was at the library all the time, just learning about the body and sexual functioning. So, and how it was related to me and my personal relationships that I was having. So that's really where I got the idea to start coaching individuals. I was coaching people without even realizing I was coaching people, and because people were also hungry for this information and they wanted this topic to be normalized for them too. So I just started doing it. And then one day I was like, oh my gosh, this can be a career. So I went to school. I got my undergrad in sociology and community health. And then I entered a program called Sex Coach U. It's located in Los Angeles. And I got to learn from Dr. Patty Britton, who is the pioneer of sex coaching. So I got to learn from the best. And I started my own practice here in Portland in 2016. And I really wanted to focus my practice for women who are also wanting to take that journey in exploring their sexuality and empowering them to step into that and own it. So I specialize in coaching women and couples. And I am so excited to share space today with all of you to really help teach you how to create a relationship that you love.
Well, I'm really thankful to have you both. And I can say that, sexuality, it doesn't leave us. And that's one thing that you taught me when I was, kind of in the backgrounds at some of the classes, is that there's so much shame and stigma attached to it. And even as we get older, there is still a need for that intimacy with, one another, and that never does leave us. So if you'd like, could you please explain, kind of a little bit more about, sexuality, how to feel empowered, that also in our relationships, how to have better relationships during this time?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're here today to talk about how to create a relationship that you love. And Kristine and I landed on this topic after years of conversations. We're talking about work, about our clients, and really just talking about how many couples we work with who don't love their relationship. They love each other, but it's more of a, we're committed, we've been through hard stuff together type of love, and it's no longer a passionate, erotic, exciting type of love that really makes you feel excited about your relationship. So we are going to talk about a lot more today than just sexuality. Sexuality is incredibly important. We're both huge proponents of talking about sex and pleasure, regardless of how old you are. But today we really want to empower couples with what we feel are the fundamental ingredients that are going to help you create and maintain a long-lasting, super exciting, emotional and sexual relationship.
A relationship that leaves you wanting more.
Oh, yes. That's nice. Yeah. That sense when you're so hungry for each other, right? It feels like you can go deeper. There's always something new to learn, something new to experience. We don't want anyone to feel, if they've been married for 5 years or 50 years, that things are stale, right? There's no need to feel like things have gone stale. So
I think it's also a matter of what we're going to talk about today is those foundational pieces, but then also it is the viewer's responsibility to then meet that with a prioritization around what we're about to teach you.
That's right. And we do hope today to share a combination of information that you can chew on and think about. It'll be a little more intellectual, but we're also going to give you action steps because just like Kristine said, talk is cheap. So we can sit here and talk and paint this beautiful picture of creating an exciting relationship. But if you don't follow it up after you watch this talk with, actionable behavioral changes in your life and relationship, you're going to continue to feel stuck. And we really want to help people out of that stuck place and into action. Yeah. So we are going to break this down today into 3 pillars. And if you'd like, you can imagine that these are 3 pillars that are holding up a healthy, exciting relationship that you love. And if any one pillar is faulty, is rotted, is falling over, the whole structure really will crumble. So let's dive in.
Let's dive in.
So we're going to start with our first pillar, which might feel a little bit counterintuitive because it's actually not about your relationship at all. This pillar we call personal identity. And what we find in our work and in our lives and our friendships is it's so common for people who have been married for a while or partnered for, multiple years or multiple decades to feel like they start to lose themselves. And it's not just the relationship, right? You can lose yourself in so many places. You can lose yourself in your relationship, in your career, in your role as a parent, in your role as a caregiver for anyone in your life, parents or even friends sometimes if you're a real people pleaser. And we hear people say, I woke up this morning and I realized that I don't know who I am anymore. And my whole life, my whole identity is now about these other people. And what we know is that you can't have a relationship you love if you aren't really taking good care of yourself first. What do you think?
I definitely agree with that. I've witnessed a lot of my clients personally having an aha moment, waking up almost like years later saying, I've lost sight of myself. I no longer do the things that are important to me as a woman, as a person, as a man, as an individual. So it's really important that you start kind of pulling back the layers and remembering who you were before entering a relationship. What hobbies did you love to do? What made you you? Because remember, when you first met your partner, they were drawn to those pieces of you. They were attracted to that vitality that you had, right? So over time, if you lose that, essentially your partner is kind of going, wait, but you used to do all these really cool things and now you don't do them anymore.
You used to be so interesting. Yeah. Now you're so boring, right? That's like,
it's kind of what I'm saying.
Yeah. But the sad thing is it's kind of true, right? When you lose yourself, you do become kind of a boring person, right? There's not a lot of vitality or interest to your personality. So one way you can start questioning in yourself if you've lost touch is, how easy is it for you to articulate what it is you need in life to feel happy, to feel pleasure, to feel joy and excitement? If you're the kind of person who can really quickly list off like, oh yes, I love connecting to this group of friends and I'm interested in pursuing these hobbies and I'm volunteering for this cause and I'm reading these books and I'm, exploring self-pleasure. If you can really list all of these things you're interested in, chances are you have a pretty good connection to yourself. But what I find, especially in the therapy office, when I ask people this question, they don't know the answer. It just befuddles them, right? This look comes across their face like, whoa, are you speaking French? Like what? This just isn't a language that I have used when I've been thinking about myself for so many years. So sometimes these pieces of our identity can get buried really deep inside. And it does take some time and some unpacking in order to touch into them again. So going into all of the details about how to do this self-fulfillment piece is beyond the scope of our presentation today. We are going to focus mainly on the relationship, but we really want to emphasize that your relationship is only going to be as successful as your relationship with yourself is successful. So if you feel like you've lost yourself, if you have a hard time articulating your needs, telling your partner what you're interested in, or just having relationships outside of your family unit, we really invite you to take some time to work on yourself. The more work you do on yourself, I think the better your relationship will be.
Absolutely. And one thing I see a lot of too is couples who are having, infrequent sex or not really feeling connection, not having that emotional connection anymore. It's because their time spent together is very overlapping. So they are constantly with each other. They're their only source of emotional outlet. And you just start to lose sight of who you are as an individual.
Yeah. So go be your best self, whatever that looks like for you.
I think too that, women, we see that when we're having families and losing that sense of self because you're caretaking for children and husbands and all of that. But then also too with some of our older adults, when you're talking about, people being attracted to how you were prior to the relationship. Some people have been together since, you know, they were teenagers, which all that time together, you know, in a later part, they may just be like, I don't know a time without this person.
Yeah, sure.
And really, as marriage goes on, it does seem like you kind of merge into one brain. And then you start dressing similarly. Um, but no, I do think that it seems like women, we had a talk earlier on creating boundaries, that so many women that I have talked to really struggle with that, because in having those types of boundaries in our life, either to take time for ourselves, or maybe even how we want to be treated in certain relationships, or whatever that means to this individual, um, it can be very, I guess women have a hard time sometimes, and I'm generalizing, but really setting, almost standing up for themselves and standing for themselves, whether it's in relationships that are intimate and otherwise.
Yeah. I think you're absolutely right. And I'm going to say, you know, one broad generalization that is very gendered, but we'll go with it for now, that women in general, like you said, tend to have a hard time setting boundaries. They tend to show up as caretakers, so they put other people before themselves. But we also notice that men are also struggling in this way. And namely, you know, men in our culture are not socialized around how to invest in meaningful friendships. So men, we find, are really struggling with profound loneliness, depression. They count on their wives for so much of their connection because they just don't know how to go into the world, engage with people and interests. So in that way, women are actually, you know, it's much easier for women on average to jump into new relationships and hobbies than it is for men. So we need to really keep our eye out on all of the ways we struggle individually with showing up and prioritizing ourselves. And I think a great relationship comes when you're able to really support your partner in doing things that feel scary and hard for them to do.
I was just going to say that exact thing is, as a partner, you can be that supportive person to say, hey, maybe we could put some money aside this month and you can sign up for that class you've been talking about. Or, hey, you're really into woodworking. Let's hop on a computer and find you some classes that you can take. Or just be that motivating force in your partner's life to say, hey, go do this thing, go, it'll be good for us, right? And if you do that, hopefully your partner in turn will also reciprocate that support for you as well.
Yeah, it is true that this, you know, self-development and fulfillment is really hard to do if your partner doesn't have your back. So this is going to work out the best for couples who are both stepping up to the plate and are saying, hey, we both need to do more of this. We've both lost ourselves a bit. We need to discover who we are and invest in ourselves as individuals. Let's support each other. Let's be an accountability team to make sure we're doing that simultaneously. When you have, now this is might be a little scary to say, but it's true. So I want to say it. When you have a relationship where one person becomes really committed to self-development and taking good care of themselves and the other partner is not on board at all, that's a situation that often leads to divorce. Because one partner wakes up and is all of a sudden is really hungry for life and hungry for more. And they'll say things like, I think I'm outgrowing you, right? I think we don't have anything in common anymore. And that it's not actually true. I think the truer statement is you didn't grow together, so you grew apart. So if you can prioritize growing together, chances are you will discover new things about yourself and each other that, again, make you really love your relationship.
Also, just having that element of attraction,
right?
Of something different in your partner, right? That novelty piece, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about later, but I think that's important to bring up right now too.
Yeah, this really is a foundational piece for everything else we're going to talk about.
I appreciate that you guys did talk about men, because one of the things that we have certainly seen, especially as men get older, is when they go to retire, let's say they had a very demanding job, and some of Now that they're retired, they want to spend their time with their wives, and their wives are like, I have a full
I'm out of
life.
here.
I don't need to, well, I hate this term, but someone I had heard say, I'm not here to babysit you. You go get your own life, and I got mine
Yeah.
going. And I've seen a lot of men very lonely.
Mhm.
And some of them are frequent users of our center at times. Just trying, they almost seem kind of lost sometime at that time in
Absolutely.
their lives.
Mhm.
And then also, too, I had heard that with women, we kind of get our emotional needs met from a variety of different sources. You know, it could be our friends, other family members, even maybe relationships with our children, or we just kind of get our emotional needs met all kinds of places. But it seems like men, the woman in their life or partner in their life, is kind of their primary emotional outlet. And so they're like you talking about not having like some of these other relationships outside of the intimate relationship can create that loneliness. So I really appreciate that you touched on that for sure.
Yes, it's huge. And I just want to name that it's not that way because women are more social, right? It's that the situation unfolds that way because our society has conditioned men not to know how to connect with people in a more vulnerable way. So this is really a societal problem, and the only way we're going to overcome it and change the script for men is to show up for them in a different way, to give them access to different information and opportunities. Because the fact is, it doesn't matter what gender you are, everybody needs connection, and we all need connection from a variety of spaces. Anytime we put all of our eggs in one basket, we're just asking for trouble.
I do appreciate you touching on that. It's just so vital. So vital. And I think a lot of times in these relationships, we tend to, if we're feeling unhappy, that we are wanting to see it outside of ourselves but not look within ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly I think during this time in the world, it's given us all the chance to do that. And really go deep into what it is we need, want, and feel.
Yes, absolutely. And the feeling part is where we're actually headed next. So this feels like a really good segue. So our second pillar is all about emotional connection. When you are taking good care of yourself and you are developing your individual identity, you are going to have so much more to contribute to the emotional connection in your relationship. Because like we said earlier, you're going to be a more interesting person to be around, right? And that interest, the novelty, that's the grist for the mill when it comes to deepening our emotional connections. So first I'm going to talk about, what are emotions and how do we categorize different types of emotions? In general, we can think of emotions as showing up in one of two ways. And an image I like to use to illustrate this is, imagine, if you will, an iceberg in the ocean and a nice cross section of that iceberg. So you can see the little peak of ice on top and then the huge chunk of ice that's below the surface of the water. Now, when you're on a boat floating out at sea, all you can see from the boat is that peak, the little peak of ice on top. That's what you see. You don't see the massive boulder of ice underneath the surface until you kind of slam into it. So the way this fits in with emotions, we have two types of emotions, and I'm going to call them primary emotions and secondary emotions. Primary emotions are the feelings that exist underneath the surface of the water. Secondary emotions are the little peak of ice on top. We can also think of secondary emotions as our reactive emotions. So the way emotions work, and this is based on neuroscience. This is how our brain and our nervous system process information and translate that into feeling. So first, there's a trigger in our environment. Something happens that communicates to my brain that I should feel something. So let's say, for example, I looked over at Kristine and she rolled her eyes at me. Right? My brain would pick up on a cue like, oh, wait, something just happened. And instantaneously, I would have a feeling in my gut. And that feeling in my gut, that's the primary emotion. Now, these tend to be softer, more vulnerable emotions. I'll explain that more in a minute. The interesting thing that happens in our bodies so quickly, we don't even have time to register that it's happened. So we feel that primary emotion in our gut, and instantaneously our body reacts to the vulnerable emotion that we feel. So for example, if I look over and I see that Kristine rolls her eyes at me, I might immediately feel scared in my gut, right? Or I might feel hurt or lonely or disconnected. But I'm going to react to that with another emotion. And that reactive secondary emotion might be defensiveness or criticism. Sometimes it looks like stonewalling, right? Where I actually put up a wall and ignore her, right? I'm reacting by not reacting. What other kind of reactive emotions can you think of? I think criticism and defensiveness are really common ones.
Embarrassment?
Embarrassment could be either, right? Embarrassment could be a primary emotion. You could feel it in your gut. But like, how do you respond to embarrassment?
I think it was, just shutting down,
right?
Freezing,
withdrawing, freezing, right? Or it could be something more reactive, more in your face, right? It could be I'm gonna throw some daggers at you because you've just gotten too close to the surface of what I'm feeling. So secondary emotions are feelings that push people away, right? I'm going to react to Kristine in a way that puts up a wall for me and creates some distance between the two of us, so I'm less likely to be emotionally hurt. Primary emotions, when expressed, are feelings that pull us together. Now, the problem that most couples have is that they get caught in repetitive cycles of reactive emotion. Right? So, and think about it. She rolls her eyes at me. I feel sad, but I get catty back, and I kind of say something snippy. Well, that starts a cycle for Kristine, right? Because I've just snapped at her. So she might feel embarrassed or hurt in her gut, but then she responds back by withdrawing and ignoring me. So I see her reactivity, and then you just get looped in and you just keep going around and around and around. And the interesting thing is when you're with a partner for a long amount of time, this pattern becomes very predictable. So my first action item for you today when it comes to deepening emotional connection is to talk to your partner about the ways that you fight and to see if you can both identify one or two secondary reactive emotions that you tend to default to in moments of conflict. Nicolette, I'm curious, is this making sense?
Yes, it is. And I have never dealt with this ever in
not you.
my relationship. Yeah, we all have defaults. Isn't that interesting? And I think it was Dr. Sue Johnson who kind of talks about, because she is the pioneer of emotionally focused therapy, which I believe you're a practitioner of. Is that correct, Maegan?
That is correct, yes.
But she really talked about kind of identifying that, or at least both individuals recognizing when they're starting to get sucked into that loop. And that can be really hard. And that's also hard to be vulnerable in saying, I feel scared, or I feel any type of vulnerable emotion that we have that is below the surface. Like you said, embarrassment, but it may come out as anger. And there's the dagger.
Man, Nicolette, I'm wondering if you're actually a couples therapist in disguise.
It's true. Maybe I was in a past life.
You've been holding out on me all these years. It's not fair.
Well, and I think that, the whole notion that, and I believe it's Dr. Sue who also says this too, is people think that we're out there looking for this person to complete us, our soulmate, and everything like that. But really that takes away the work that is involved in that true commitment to each other and really building something together. I think most people are under this notion that it should just be easy, which there are times of that, but I certainly think that there does take work, and there does take a certain level of just absolute commitment to each other to see it through. That you
Yeah.
owe that to the other person as well as the relationship and yourself.
Absolutely. And I do think it's a big myth perpetuated by romantic comedies mostly that our marriages should be easy. Because they're not. I don't know one person who is successfully married who would describe marriage as a task that is easy. Now, I would say that I want to feel a lot of ease with my partner in our interactions and the way we connect on a day-to-day basis. When I'm in my home with my partner, I want to feel that there is ease between us. But that doesn't mean that our relationship is easy. If you want to be married for the long term, you're going to have to put in the work. And that's beautiful. That's part of what makes being married or being committed for a long time worth it. You know, you have somebody who is committed to going through the hard stuff with you. But this is where I want you to start. Everything we're saying is true, but if you're still stuck in some really old, repetitive, well-worn grooves of negative communication and conflict, you can't just dive right in to the beautiful vulnerability that we're talking about. So I want us to be really realistic about what it takes to get out of those old grooves that really aren't facilitating a deeper emotional connection. And you can do that by first identifying what's my default mode. When things are tense between us, how am I likely to respond, right? I will name, like, my default mode is I get defensive and critical. Right? I kind of want to defend myself, and I start, looking at my partner and finding things about him that, maybe it's really your fault because this, and this. And I know that about myself, and I know that my partner tends to shut down. I know that he'll get a little bit defensive, and then he'll shut down and he'll sort of disappear. And then we get into a bit of a cycle. And you're familiar with this if you are familiar with EFT literature, that there tends to be a pursuer and a withdrawer in the relationship. There's one person who's trying to continue the dialogue. Let's keep talking. Let's fight this out. And there's another person that says, no, that feels way too dangerous for me. I would rather walk away from this and not have this conflict with you. So the first step here is really just to identify, what is your default? What secondary emotions are most likely to pop up for you in moments of conflict? Who pursues and who withdraws? You have to name it to tame it, right? As soon as you can name what you do and how you're perpetuating negative cycles of interaction, you can really start to make some significant shifts in the way that you communicate with each other. And as you do that, it opens up the space to really start connecting in this more vulnerable way. And we do that, just like you were saying, Nicolette, by communicating our primary emotions, our gut felt emotions. This is when I talk to you about my fears, about things I'm ashamed of, embarrassed by, but also really positive things that are also vulnerable, like my hopes and my dreams and my passions. It's that feeling of like, ooh, this is just a little bit risky to say, right? And when you sink into that place with your partner and you're both really showing up and you're sharing things that you wouldn't share with anybody else, you wouldn't post on social media or, tell a colleague, like, that's when the magic really starts to happen in the relationship. And sometimes I'll have couples come into my office who have been together for a really long time. And they'll say to me, but we already know everything about each other. Those questions you gave us to talk about, we already know all of those answers. And I call BS. Like, that isn't actually true, because who you are today isn't the same as who you were when you answered those questions 5 years ago or 25 years ago. And if the answers are the same, well, let's rewind back to pillar number 1. That means that you probably haven't been spending as much time working on yourself as you should, because if you were, you would have so many new things to talk about. Debbie, do you have anything to add to this?
Yeah. So one of the things I love to educate people on is really the definition of intimacy, which is vulnerability. When you show up and be vulnerable with any loved ones, you can be vulnerable with your partner, family members, friends, and that person who you're being vulnerable with gives you a positive response to that vulnerability. Like, Thank you so much for sharing that with me. I'm honored you decided to share that with me. I'm really honored. Thank you so much.
Makes me want to tell you again.
See?
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that with me. Great response to someone sharing vulnerability with you. So once you start to develop that reliability with your partner of, oh, I know how they're going to respond now to me being vulnerable, it wants you to come back for more. It motivates you to keep sharing that energy with your partner because you know now how they're going to react to that vulnerability.
Keep going deeper.
Yeah.
I really like how you say that because relationships can develop those ruts, and every relationship has a story, and some of that involves wounds. And I think too, rebuilding that trust, that's just a continual thing that I really think that relationships do reinforce. Good relationships is that they just keep going at it and trying to rebuild and create deeper trust in that intimacy. And I really like how you said as well, Maegan, about naming it to tame it. Another slogan I heard was, feelings buried alive never die. And it's
That sounds
very
horrifying.
true. It can be.
Yeah, definitely.
It can be.
Absolutely true. Yeah.
Especially if there's old resentments or what have you in the relationship from not putting it out there.
I want to add a plug here, Nicolette, for couples therapy, and just a reminder that you don't have to do this work alone. And if it feels like you have a mountain of baggage that you have to work through before you can arrive at the place with your partner where there is ease and comfort going deep and being vulnerable, it could be tremendously helpful to invest in the support of a couples therapist who can guide you through that process with ease and professionalism. So if you're struggling, don't stop, right? There's nothing that drives me nuts more than when people say, well, we tried to work on our relationship, but there was just too much baggage. We've just been doing this for too long. It's almost like you're saying that you're this inflexible person who's incapable of change, which again, I call BS. That isn't true. So if you need extra support, get it. There's no reason that you can't have a relationship that you love.
And also that's a great first step towards practicing deeper vulnerability is to say, I think we need help.
Yes.
It's okay to ask for help and to reach out for help.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have two more points here about emotional connection, and then we will move into physical touch and sexual intimacy. So Kristine and I were brainstorming the other day, what are a few of our favorite questions to deepen intimacy, to really cultivate vulnerability in the relationship. And we want to share just 3 simple questions with you. You can write them down, and another action item, right? Once you really name what are the secondary emotions, what are the conflict patterns that keep us stuck in disconnection, and you start to move into sharing more primary emotion and connecting through more vulnerability. These are 3 questions you can use as a bit of an experiment to see, like, let's ask each other these questions and see what unfolds between us. If it goes great, fantastic. If you can't do it, if conflict shows up, go to a couples therapist. It means you need a little bit of extra help. So the first question that we love is, describe a time in our past when you felt really connected to me. And this gives you an opportunity to do a couple of things. It gives you an opportunity to think back to a time in the relationship when things felt really great. And sometimes, especially in long-term relationships, we need that reminder of where we came from. It also opens the door to a conversation about what we might want more of in our relationship right now. So that's question number 1. Describe a time in our relationship when you felt really connected to me. The next question is, tell me about your dreams for the future. And I encourage everyone to talk about this question. I don't care if you're 18, 38, or 88. You get to have dreams for your future at all times. And this could be a dream you have for yourself, a dream you have for your relationship. Talking about our hopes and our dreams and our fantasies, that really opens the door to connecting with each other in a much deeper and more meaningful way. And the final question, which this one can be a bit of a sad one, but it's really important, right? It really helps highlight some things that might be missing from your life. I want you and your partner to imagine that one of you is on your deathbed and you only have hours to live. And in these last few hours, you're reflecting on this life that you've lived together. And I want you to try to identify, looking back on this life that you lived, what do you wish you would have done more of? What do you regret? What do you regret doing? What do you regret not doing? If you had to do it all over again, what would be different? This is a really powerful question, and it takes people to a pretty deep place emotionally if you really let yourself go there. But it also has the potential to highlight for you exactly what actionable changes you need to make in your life and your relationship starting immediately. Okay, so those are 3 questions. Nicolette, before I move into my my last comment, any emotional reactions for you to those questions?
They seem to be simple, but man, are they hardcore. I mean,
Yeah.
as you were saying that, I'm thinking, and I think that people sometimes, when they look at relationships, that maybe the beginning was supposed to be like the best time or what have you, but I think we sometimes forget all the in between.
Yeah.
Some of these real heartfelt moments don't have to be necessarily when things are fresh and new. It can be, really meeting each other on a real intimate level, at certain times, or maybe times of true vulnerability, like maybe something tragic happening and that person showing up for you. But I do really think that, and looking into the future, like what do you really want, and building that dream together. It doesn't have to be so individual. It's like, what is our dream together? And so, no, I think people really, I hope that they take this opportunity with some of this extra time that we do have to really go deep and give ourselves that time and space to do that together.
Yeah, me too. I want to, before we move on, make one more plug. We talked a bit about this earlier in the presentation, but I really want to emphasize again the importance of finding a balance in your relationship between togetherness and separateness. And I'm thinking about this right now, Nicolette, as you mentioned, the quarantine, the pandemic, and how much time we are spending with our partners. There are some real benefits to this time we have together, just like you said. Now's the time, as you're doing a puzzle or, whatever you're doing to sort of pass the time, add one of these conversations into the mix. Like, really be smart about how you utilize this time together so that you are deepening your connection. But my pro tip for you is don't bank on that being successful if you're spending all of your time together, because as much as we love our spouses, we are not designed to be together 24/7. And most couples right now are actually really struggling with all of the together time, because going back to pillar number 1, investing in yourself outside of your relationship as an individual is part of what allows you to come back into your relationship as a really interesting person to be around. So, yes, I want you to really schedule time to connect in an intimate way, have date nights, use question prompts, do whatever you need to ease yourself in to deeper, more vulnerable conversations. But on the flip side of that, I'm also going to encourage you to schedule time away from each other. This is something that Kristine and I have been experimenting with during quarantine in our own relationships, and we love it.
It's pretty good.
It's fabulous, right? There's nothing better, and this is so important, that you have opportunities to miss your partner. And that comes with being separate from each other and investing in yourself in individual ways. So if you're starting to feel like you've been around each other a lot, if you're super fused, like you said, if your brains feel like they've become one, that's a good indicator that it could be tremendously helpful to take some breaks from one another. Go be alone. Go hang out with friends. Be someone who isn't married for a minute, with rules and boundaries, of course. But yes, so please keep that in mind. Emotional connection, the more separateness you have in the relationship, the deeper you're going to be able to go together. I know that feels counterintuitive, but it's totally true.
And if you want to take a small step towards alone time, I would suggest saying to your partner, hey, I think I'm going to go for an extended walk. And if your partner says, oh, that sounds great, let me grab my shoes, let me grab the leash for the dog, say, you know what, actually, I was hoping to go by myself. There's an episode of this podcast I'm really wanting to dive into. So I would love to have your company, but today I'm going to go by myself.
Yeah, or even I would not love to have your company. I love you, but if I'm being really honest, I don't want your company right now. I need some space so that I can come back in and have something new and fresh to offer. So on that note, I have 3 books I'm going to recommend. If any parts of this conversation about emotional connection have resonated with you, we want to make sure that you have plenty of avenues to take action after this talk today. So, Nicolette, would it be okay if I shared the book recommendations?
Absolutely. And I can
great.
say too, just a little note that, I mean, for myself, my husband, he was like, I knew you liked art and everything, but I didn't realize how much. Because that's been my kind of outlet during this time. And it's been great. It is so fulfilling. And then at the end of the evening, we come together and watch probably some really ridiculous reality TV show. And then kind of come together that way.
Yes, that's beautiful. Thank you for that example. Okay, the first recommendation I have, many of you are probably familiar with, but it's so good, we're going to recommend it again. This is The 5 Love Languages by Gary Chapman. So this is I'm trying to get it straight for you here. Here we go. This is a really great book to help you start to understand different ways that you can contribute to your partner in a meaningful way. So just a quick example, if your partner's love language is affectionate touch and your love language is receiving gifts, you need to know that about each other, because if I'm giving a bunch of gifts to my partner who's really craving touch, he's probably not going to feel very loved or connected to me. And vice versa. If he's giving me lots of hugs, but what I really want is a thoughtful present, I'm not feeling as connected to him as I could if we were speaking each other's languages. So 5 Love Languages is a very simple read, an easy place to start. There's even a quiz on the 5 Love Languages website. So if you want to skip the book and go straight to the quiz, that's available to you as well. My next recommendation, Nicolette, you're going to love this one, is by Dr. Sue Johnson. And this is called Hold Me Tight, 7 Conversations for a Lifetime of Love. And this is a really great book if you're at that point in your relationship where you're ready to deepen vulnerability and start having conversations in a deeper way. This book is going to give you a lot of structure to do that. So highly recommend this. And my next book is it's the book I use every day in my office and I recommend most frequently for couples who are struggling to connect. There's that conflict cycle that we talked about is just running rampant, and it feels like you don't know how to get underneath it. So if you're really needing sort of a substitute for couples therapy, then I am going to recommend to you Emotionally Focused Couples Therapy for Dummies. And I apologize for calling you a dummy. I don't actually think you're a dummy. It's just the name of the book. But this is an excellent resource. It's almost a step-by-step guide, if you will, that your emotionally focused couples therapist would use with you in session. So if you need something that is more therapeutic, but you don't have the funds or the time or whatever to work with a couples therapist one-on-one, I highly recommend starting here. So those are my recommendations for emotional connection. And now I'm going to pass the torch over to Kristine so we can start talking about physical intimacy.
All right, physical intimacy. So one thing I see a lot of with couples is losing a sense of novelty over time within the relationship. So if you are in a long-term relationship, think back to when you first started dating your person. Things were super exciting. You had so much curiosity for who this person was. You just wanted to soak in every ounce of their being. Tell me more, tell me more. Probably staying up till 3 a.m. talking, right? And those really delicious sex hormones are just being released in your brain. And you're just like, I'm feeling like I want more. We need to start incorporating more of that into your relationship. So building novelty, being more curious with your partner, doing things outside of your comfort zone. That can mean anything from taking a class together, doing activities that you used to do together, but life got in the way and you no longer do those things with each other. Why did you stop? Pick it back up again. So for example, let's say one of the things you did together while dating was playing tennis. You had just had a lot of, neither one of you cared if you were good or not. It was just fun to like go hit the ball back and forth. It was exercise. It was connective. So pick up that activity again, and it will start to give you that feeling of, oh my gosh, remember when we used to have so much fun doing this? That's novelty. So novelty can happen on the emotional level. So dating your partner, feeling that connection, practicing all of the things that we just talked about with that emotional intimacy piece. But that novelty can also be a really important and yummy element in the bedroom. So trying new things, having conversations around, what do you want? What do you need? How can I better bring you pleasure into these experiences? And once you start to have those deeper conversations, you start to understand your partner better, and your partner is having a good time. They want to show up more often for those intimate moments with you. If things are just kind of mundane and happening the same way every time, your partner's probably not as excited to be a part of that experience with you. So why not join together and say, hey, let's have some more fun, right? Let's bring some novelty into the bedroom. So one of the things that I really recommend that you start doing as a couple is dating your spouse. So having a conversation, start off, action step here, start off by having a conversation with your partner around frequency of dates. How often are you wanting to have a date? Have a conversation around budget so that both of you know when you're planning a date, this is the cap amount of money that you're each spending on this date. The other really important element is to share responsibility with your partner on who's planning the date so that that responsibility doesn't fall on just one person. I see that happen a lot. One partner is usually the house manager, scheduling everything, making sure everything's running smoothly. But that person is also like, I'm always the one who initiates physical intimacy. I'm always the one who initiates dates, saying I need this and I need that. And I'm burned out. I don't want to do it anymore. I want my partner to take on that responsibility with me, having a really fair balance around planning the dates and saying, hey, I'm going to take you out because you deserve it.
That feels great.
Yeah. You don't have to do anything.
Oh, music to my ears.
All you have to do is show up and have a good time.
Yeah.
Have an open mind, right? Because we're probably going to try something new.
Right.
So that leads me to another point about dating. In this conversation, have a conversation around hard no's so that your partner is understanding what's going to make you feel really uncomfortable and back away from the date. Right? So again, we want your partner to be very comfortable and excited about these dates. So having a conversation, my hard no, my husband absolutely knows not to plan a hiking trip. I'm not a hiker. I don't want to hike. That's going to make me feel really uncomfortable and not excited about the date, right? So in our conversation, I would say definitely no hiking. And my partner's like, got it. I don't want to upset you, right? And so having that exchange to be like, okay, now I know what not to plan for you. Everything else is free game. And that leaves a lot of options, right? it allows you to start practicing more and more curiosity with your partner and kind of pushing the boundaries around your own relational bubble and what makes you comfortable. So that's what's going to create that novelty. Do you have any other suggestions?
I love all of those suggestions. I love weaving in boundaries and remembering that you're always allowed to have boundaries. You're always allowed to say no. Trying to get clear ahead of time about what those no's are, I think, is a really brilliant suggestion. But I just want to reinforce the importance of keeping it balanced so that, one partner, usually the wife in a heterosexual relationship, not always, but usually, becomes responsible for the emotional labor of planning the date. And that's just going to feed into all of the resentment that's already there. And then it's not going to happen. So just again, that this is only going to be successful, I think, if it feels really balanced and you're both 100% on board with trying this strategy.
And it has to be an ongoing element to your relationship. So I tell my couples when I teach them this outline, I'm like, you're going to be doing this for the whole duration of your relationship.
Right.
You will forever now be dating each other. It's so important. And that you both understand, of course, the balance that needs to take place.
And, I'm just going to weave in one thing. We don't have to go into it, but I do think it's important to note that this is why so many people have affairs, right? They don't have affairs because their needs cannot be met in the relationship. They have affairs because they're craving this novelty and this connection and that energy that you show up with someone in a new relationship when everything feels fresh and exciting. So the affair feels appealing. But what we're trying to say to you here is, you know what? You don't need to blow up your whole life. You can replicate the new relationship energy right here and right now, following these steps that Kristine is talking about.
Absolutely. Could not be more jazzed about what she just said.
We didn't plan that part. It felt important to say.
Very important. But I think that can also be a little bit of a scary step for people to take and to be vulnerable. Again, practicing vulnerability and saying to your partner, I think we need to do this. I think we need to start incorporating more novelty. Here's what I learned. Are you on board?
Yeah.
Right? And then from there, taking that step forward together.
And the idea of saying no or having a list of no's, I think, is really important when it comes to touch too. So if you can say to your partner, here are the things sexually that I'm absolutely not open to exploring, it then gives your partner, all of this space to initiate new activities.
So that brings me to my next point is touch. And oftentimes what happens in long-term relationships is couples stop touching each other. They stop exchanging affectionate touch, playful touch, because there's a little bit of a fear in the background that your partner is trying to initiate sex through touch. It's nonverbal communication that you're interpreting probably incorrectly, but your partner is just, their love language is probably physical touch. And so they're just wanting to show you that they love you and they're wanting that back from you. But you're interpreting it as, oh my gosh, we haven't had sex in a while. I'm feeling really scared and intimidated by that. So I'm just slowly going to stop touching. And that's really unfortunate. So one of the things that I want to teach you how to do today is to slowly step back into touch with your partner in a safe, comfortable space that is non-sexual. So it's working with communication, boundaries, asking for what you want and need, and just breaking that uncomfortable feeling of we haven't touched in a while. How do we do this? Right? So it's called the 3-minute game. And you are going to start by sharing initiation of the 3-minute game. So if Maegan and I were about to play this game, I would say, Maegan, would you like to play the 3-minute game right now?
Sure.
Great. So then I would say, question 1, how do you want me to touch you for 3 minutes? And then you think about it and you'd be like, oh, I would love a scalp massage. And I say to myself, okay, self, is that something I can give her with a full heart for 3 minutes? Am I comfortable doing that? Then I agree. Yes, I would love to give you that. I set a timer and I give her a scalp massage. And then I ask question 2, how do you want to touch me for 3 minutes? And then she thinks about it. She says, I want to give you a foot rub. I'm like, oh, that sounds amazing. Yes, I would love to receive that. And then she rubs my feet for 3 minutes. And because I've been the first initiator of this exchange, I'm keeping track of those 3 minutes. So I've asked question 1 and question 2. So now it's Maegan's turn to ask question 1 and question 2. Mm-hmm. And you're sharing a balance, right? What do I want? What do I need? And if you have a hard time being able to choose something, I say just do a body scan. Start at the very top of your head, close your eyes, and work your way down to your feet. Tapping into anything that feels a little tight or tense, or maybe you need some comforting. Maybe it's been a really an emotionally hard day and you'd really just like to be held for 3 minutes. Mm-hmm. It's perfectly fine to ask for that. So let's say Maegan asks me for something that I'm uncomfortable with, right? Something that might be a little bit on the verge of sexual when this is supposed to be a non-sexual game. I feel that, right? I'm like, you know what? That doesn't make me feel good. I'm feeling a little bit scared by that. And you can say no to any request that your partner is saying. You can say, you know what? I'm really not feeling like that today. Can you please choose something else? Mm-hmm. And your partner has to choose something else because you're setting a boundary. That's going to make me feel uncomfortable. Here's what's going to make me feel comfortable. Mm-hmm. It's very important that each of you do feel comfortable because that's what's going to motivate you to come back and play this game again. You have to have trust that your partner is going to listen to that and respect your boundary. So I recommend couples play this 3 times a week, sharing initiation. So I initiated the first game. So now 2 days go by, Maegan's going to initiate the next game. And if I'm not feeling like it, just say, you know what, that sounds great, but I'm exhausted. I'm really tired. And I feel like I couldn't fully be present for that. But I'm going to ask you tomorrow. Mm-hmm. See what I mean?
It's then your job to initiate next. If you're going to say no, then you need to initiate again. Yes. Don't expect me to keep following up with you.
Absolutely.
That feels fair.
Yeah. What I love about this game too is it's a judgment-free space. Mm-hmm. So your partner, while asking for something that's non-sexual, can ask for whatever they want, which is pretty cool because you can get pretty creative and try some new things. It doesn't have to just be around the hands and touching. It can be anything that you want. Like I said, I could ask her to snuggle me for 3 minutes. And if she's okay with that, then let's do it. Mm-hmm. I love it.
I love this game.
Me too.
This is the best. And I think that one piece that I'm being reminded of is you were saying, if someone says no, follow it up with something else. That feels really, really important. Because when I think about all of the couples I work with who have non-sexual relationships, it often starts because they didn't know how to negotiate no's. So if someone said, no, I'm not in the mood, or that's not going to work for me, they just stop trying. Mm-hmm. And because it's so vulnerable to talk about sex and to ask for what we need. And for many people, it's easier to just drop it and walk away than it is to stay really engaged and in a conversation that feels vulnerable and uncomfortable. So I love that the rule is you can say no, but it has to be followed up with something else.
And if you have children, grandchildren, this is also a really great game to teach consent.
Oh, great. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Win-win.
I know. It's super win-win.
What do you think about this game, Nicolette?
I think that, you know, when you did the talk last time at our center, one of the things that we've seen as well is, especially for some of the men as they get older and some of the physical complications that can happen, it's like, well, if I can't provide the full enchilada meal deal, I don't want to feel vulnerable and disappointing. And so therefore, I just don't want to be interested in any way resulting, in being physically intimate. And so a game like this, which is something that you talked to some of our participants about, felt very reassuring. And also built some trust between some of those relationships that had become non-sexual over time. So I've seen that with some of our people, coming back and telling us that they appreciated that it was okay to open the door with something like that. Because when we're in the beginning of a relationship, that physical touch is just like instantaneous, but certainly It's something that we also continue to need and desire throughout our lives. And so I think that it's a wonderful game. I really do. And I did want to note that the books that you recommended earlier, Maegan, are fantastic books. And I can say personally, with the 5 love languages and how different we all are, I remember when I was first married to my husband, he was like, well, I, cleaned your car, I did the dishes and the laundry, and he's just like going off, telling me all these things he did. And I was like, okay, I just wanted a hug. I just wanted a hug.
Yeah, absolutely. Such a great example. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we have more book recommendations for you.
Yes. So I want to recommend The Ultimate Guide to Seduction and Foreplay. And this is by Jessica O'Reilly and Marla Stewart. One thing I love about this book is it's a guide that's going to cover the 3 things that I talked about today: novelty, dates, and touch. Mm-hmm. And also there's a really good section in here on exploring kissing. And there's all these different ways that you can play these little games around kissing. And I absolutely love it, because I also find that a lot of couples who've been together for a long time have stopped kissing. Mm-hmm. And they don't want to, or they don't know how to start doing it again. So I love this book so much. Really a lot of really good information. Another one is Better Sex Through Mindfulness by Lori Brotto. And I think that this book speaks a little bit to pillar 1, which was doing some self-work, being able to slow down, tap into all of your senses, and not only just using that new skill set day to day in your life, but in the bedroom. It's really going to help you be able to be less distracted mentally during sexual experiences or intimacy with your partner, and just really being in the moment and tapping into all of your senses and finding real pleasure out of that. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, we have Joan Price's The Ultimate Guide to Sex After 50, which I believe we recommended last time during our talk too, but this is just a really good overall. She covers everything from your body changing to painful sex to enjoying sex in an older body, and is just a really great resource. So dive into that. And then
I have one too. This book is called Sexual Awareness. Where are we? There we go. This is by Barry and Emily McCarthy. And this book is great for couples who, like we were talking about, have moved into a more non-sexual relationship, have started avoiding touch. This is a step-by-step guide with exercises and lots of structure that you and your partner can use if you want to work your way into a sexual relationship again. Any other resources you wanted to mention?
You know what? If you are in a place in your relationship where things are good, it's loving, it's respectful, you feel like just that one thing is missing from your relationship is that intimacy piece, and you want to build that and have a more deeper, richer, fulfilling sexual experience with each other, then reach out to a sex coach. And
this sex coach.
Yes, I can help you with that piece. And really look at where you are today and what are your individual goals and mutual goals as far as what are you wanting your sex life to be a couple months from now, and I can help you get there.
Yeah, and if you're at a place in your relationship where things are feeling a little more complicated emotionally, if there's lots of conflict or past resentments that need to be worked through in service of building that beautiful sexual relationship that you want, call us at the Center for Couples and Sex Therapy, and we'd be happy to help you with that. I'd also love to mention that we both have more resources available on our websites. You can visit my website at www.ccstpdx.com. And you can visit Kristine's website at www.doyoursexlifeafavor.com. We have tons of resources. We really want you to feel, after watching this presentation today, like you know where to go next. Because listening and not taking action isn't going to change anything in your life. And I would love to just summarize here at the end, like again, coming back to the 3 pillars that we believe are going to create a long-lasting relationship that you love. Self-development, work on yourself, be alone, invest in who you are outside of the relationship so that you have something interesting and exciting to bring back into the relationship. Emotional connection and physical intimacy. We really do believe that if you are intentionally dedicating time and resources to each pillar that we described today, you will notice a transformation in the relationship that you've had, regardless of how long you have been in that relationship. And if you ever get stuck, there are therapists, there are coaches, there are so many people available to help you level up your relationship.
As professionals, there's nothing that we want more than for you to be in a happy, healthy relationship. Because I personally feel that the more happier people there are out there in the world, the more overall happy our planet and our world is going to be. And I really do think that that starts with you in your relationships.
And it's never too late.
Never too late.
Yeah.
Maegan and Kristine, I really, really appreciate you both coming here and sharing your words of wisdom with our audience. And I can say that you have really sparked a lot of interest. I have seen it in person, and I can only imagine for our viewers online and on TV as well. I hope today that all of you walk away with the inspiration to create a relationship that you love. And ultimately, I think that we have learned that today, and we've also been able to be provided with some wonderful information. And sometimes that first step is just going out and getting a book, whether it's from the library or online, and really kind of delving in deep and seeing what we really need, and finding out what we really want, and certainly reaching for that and reaching out for some of those resources like Kristine as well as Maegan. That's it for today. I'm Nicolette Hume, and thank you for taking the time to be a part of our community today. And until next time, be safe, be well, and always continue staying curious. Goodbye.